Setting the price. Let's first examine the product-oriented business. So this would be a type of business that is making an actual product. It could be a restaurant that's providing a meal. That could be the specific product. It could be you are a clothing manufacturer and your product is a dress or a shirt or something where you're actually making a product. Oftentimes the product could be a combination of product and service. So, for example, restaurant is not only providing the meal, but providing the wait and the attention to the customer, which is a service. So there is a combination. So for setting the price, we're looking at products that have some product-oriented, a physical product-oriented part of the business. So there are two sides on product pricing that's important to note. Is for the buyer, when they see the cost or the price of what they're paying to get their meal, if they're at a restaurant, or if they're buying a shirt, it would be the cost of the shirt. When they look at the cost, the higher the cost, the much more likely they will be not purchasing the item. Okay, all things being equal. If they see a better shirt that's cheaper, the same quality, they're likely to go buy it from a competitor. So when a buyer looks at costs, they really look at what am I giving up, and that could be the money that they could use to buy 2 shirts from a competitor, or they can buy a higher quality one. So the higher the cost is for your shirt, the more likely a customer would leave and go buy it from something else. So for the buyer, when they look at cost, they consider what the alternatives are. So for the seller, when you're selling your product, you mainly have the perspective of the higher you sell each product for, the more money you can make off each unit that you sell. So you look at it really from a revenue perspective of how much money you can bring in. The higher the price, the more contribution margin the company receives. And I know we haven't discussed contribution margin, but we will in a future video. So just understand that the more that you sell each unit for, the more money you bring in, and that makes each unit you sell more profitable, which means the less units you need to sell to break even for your month or year, right? So you actually need to sell less units to make the same money, the more money you sell each unit for. So for product pricing, there are a few objectives you have to understand, like what is your strategy of setting the price? So classic economics say the lower you set your price for, the more customers would want to buy, the more units you would likely sell. The higher you sell it for, the less units you'll sell. This doesn't always happen that way, but generally does. So what is your strategy in setting the price? Is it sales oriented? Do you want to keep prices low to get as many units sold as possible? This may be a good strategy. And classic examples may have been Amazon.com when they first started and they were competing against other booksellers. They sold their books as low as possible. They were actually not making a profit for their business for a number of years. And their objectives were to get as many customers buying their books as possible, which would eventually lead classic retailer brick and mortar bookstores to go out of business. So their objective was to get as much of the market share as possible. So their strategy was to keep their units as low as possible to gain market share and eventually make a profit by selling many more products than just books, right? So they had a long-term plan. They also had the funds to be operating at a loss for a number of years. Most small businesses do not have this ability, and they also don't want to sell that many units. Profit-oriented, which is the way most small businesses operate, is what is the best price to make the most amount of profit? Okay, so for a restaurant, there's only so many meals you can serve because you might be limited by the number of seats. If you're a service-based business and you're cutting hair, for example, you may be only able to work 40 hours a week. So if you're limited in the amount of units that you can sell, then a profit-oriented approach may be much more attractive to you to focus on, because you might not even need to work 40 hours a week. You can maybe only work 20 hours a week cutting hair. If you sell it for the right price, you might make as much as if you were to set it really, really low and work 40 hours a week, right? If you have a restaurant, you may not have to fill every single table all the time because you can make as much profit by actually making it so your restaurant isn't full all the time, but you're more profitable on each unit you sell. So this is what we're talking about is, you want to maximize your resources. Your resources would be the amount of tables you have in your restaurant or the number of hours you have to cut hair, but you don't want to just maximize it just to fill that up. You want to maximize it to be profitable. What's the most profit you can make with that resource you have? Okay. So customer value is the perceived value of your customer when they give up something, and it's usually money. So your customers give you money to get the product or service. And the customer value is, what is the perceived value when they give out that money and they get whatever they get? Are they happy? Are they not? And so if we look at this scale right here, if you're looking at from the customer's perspective, they give up something. If they're getting a haircut, they give up the amount of time they're sitting in a chair plus the money. Those are two examples of cost, right? This is what a customer gives up and the benefit that they get. So how quickly do they get the product or service, and how much money does it cost? And you have a cost-benefit relationship, and they're either satisfied or dissatisfied. If they get more benefit than the cost that they give up, they'll be happy. If they get less benefit for the cost that they perceive to give up, then they will be unhappy. So another example can be oil change, right? So two different businesses. One is an oil change that a customer goes in, sits in the car, the people, the workers do the oil change in 10 minutes or less, and the customer drives off. And let's say it costs the customer $60 to do this. So they gave up, 15 minutes of their time and $60. Another example might be they drop the car off at the dealership and they pick it up the next day and it costs $40, right? And so when the customer is thinking about the total cost, they're thinking about the cost of what they gave up plus maybe the time that they spent doing it or the convenience or whatever service it is. And so some customers are going to be really happy that they paid more, but it only took them 15 minutes. They didn't have to get dropped off at the dealership. They didn't have to drive home. They didn't have to go back the next day. So even if they're paying a little bit, $20 extra, they'll be happy. And some customers in that same situation just totally rely on the amount of money, so that they would be dissatisfied with that. So realize that not all customers are going to be happy with the product and service that you offer, and not all customers are going to be dissatisfied. It's understanding the types of customers that are happy or not. So this is something you have to focus on with your business model is what are the types of customers? What do they perceive as value? They don't always perceive the price they pay to be a value. Sometimes they include the quality of the unit they're getting, the time that they spent getting it, the amount of service they get. There's other factors other than just money. So that's why we say cost is not just always about money, specific amount. It's also the things that they give up. Customers give up things too to get what they want. So methods to set price. So this is where we're talking actual price that you're setting up your product, because in your business model you've already defined the value that you've created, the unique value to your customer, and that oftentimes is the service and the speed and the quality and all those other things that aren't factored into the price. When we're talking about price, you want to set the price to convey and complement the unique value that you're offering your customers. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. One is market pricing, and so this is really useful when you have lots of different products that you're selling. So let's say you're a retail store or a liquor store and you're selling groceries or liquor. You would have lots of different prices for lots of different products. You might just take all the products that you have, and whenever they come in, if they come in, you might just do a simple markup. You might multiply it by something, and then you might add the charge that it would cost you to put that money through. I think in this example we use printing. So you might be a printer, so you might any cost that you have to produce a unit, you also might mark it up by $10 per order. That way, if somebody comes in and wants business cards, right, you would still have the cost of your worker to take the job in, enter it into the printer, print it out, cut it up, ring up the charge, and so it would cost you something. So something really small like a 100-piece business card order, you wouldn't make enough money off the $1 or 1.5 markup rate. You might have to add up a service charge as well to every order. Okay. Another way to do it is keystoning. This is where you don't do a markup of $10 per order, but you just simply mark it up double what it is. This is the classic retail store. This is what most retail shops do traditionally. And this is why they kind of got into trouble with Amazon, because Amazon did a different markup pricing. So, if I was an author of a book and I was selling a book at a classic bookstore, if I sold it to the bookstore for $10, they would mark it up and the customer would pay $20. So the keystone price would be just timesing it by 2, whatever they got. What's break-even pricing? This is where you understand what it is to just break even for your business. So some types of business like Amazon understand what it is to break even, and they're really trying to get as many customers as they can. So maybe for gym memberships, if you're running a gym and you really want to ramp up the enrollment of your customers so you can fill up the customers, you might run break-even pricing for the first 3 months until you get enough customers where you break even. So that if you understand your break-even pricing, you might run that as an introductory price to keep prices just high enough to pay your costs and in order to get a lot more sales. It's good for increasing market share. For example, Amazon did that. Oftentimes, businesses where they need to get up to speed, then they offer this type of pricing. Another method is demand pricing, and this is where premium pricing comes into play. If you've ever seen really high-end purses or sunglasses and they cost 10 times what a normal purse or sunglass would cost, why do people pay that? Sometimes they pay for it not because that's the value, but there's other additional value than just the sunglass. You might buy a really nice brand of purse and people walk around and they say, wow, look at that purse. That person must be really a high class or professional. So the value is not just the purse itself, the utility of the purse, but it might be that they become known as a professional in their industry, and then they're paying for that, brand and privilege to have that product. So that's more of a premium pricing. Or maybe somebody really values their time and they want, expert service. So they might pay a demand for, let's say, going to see a doctor right away. Or they might see, car service. They might have someone come and pick up their car and have it washed and waxed and oil changed and everything, but they're the ones picking up. So those are premium pricing, and that's kind of off the scale of what most customers want, but there's plenty of customers out there that want to pay premium price for something and get extra things that the normal customers don't want. So there's a couple different other ways that we can talk about it. There's penetration pricing, captive product pricing, like let's say you sell printers and printer toner cartridge. You might offer the printer very, very cheap. So once they get locked into using that printer, then you would sell very expensive toner cartridges, and then they have to buy your toner cartridges to keep that printer running. Price skimming would be just underneath the amount of that the customers would not use your product, so you're making the most of profit. Bundling might be you package a bunch of stuff together so that a customer buys it. Oftentimes, places like Costco might bundle a bunch of things together. Cox Communications might bundle your telephone and internet together, even though you don't want the telephone. It might be cheaper for you to do this. Geographic pricing, maybe people in Southern California pay more for this type of product than somebody in Arizona. So these are all examples of demand-based methods to set your price. So there's lots of ways to set the price. Some of the factors to setting price is hopefully you've done your market research and looked at what are the competitors selling their product for. So oftentimes you can choose to set your price for whatever you want to make whatever profit you want, but your customer is going to look at your competitors' pricing to determine if it's a value or not. So you want to look at your competitors' pricing as well, and you want to compete against them, because oftentimes you can't just set whatever price you want because you have competition. You might look at the product life cycle. So for example, technology, when a new model of phone comes out, you can sell it for much more than if that phone is 1 or 2 years old and newer models are now competing. You might have a price for your new technology that might goes down in time. You might look at your distribution strategy, how you want to set your price. So you might want to set it out low to get a bunch of market share and then slowly raise it up over time. You might want to do a promotional strategy. Maybe you keep your price high, but then you offer sales throughout the year in order to, round out your year. So, okay. Next up would be setting the price for a service-oriented business.